So, picture this. You break into an old, abandoned farmhouse. Maybe you're just looking for some antique bottles, and bam, you're hit with a shotgun blast to the leg. That is exactly what happened in the case of Katko versus Briney, and it raises a huge legal question about just how far you can go to protect your property.
All right, let's get right into it. To really get a handle on the court's thinking, we're going to break this whole thing down using that classic FIRAC structure you see here. Facts, issue, rule, analysis, and finally, the conclusion.
So first up, let's frame this central dilemma. The big idea at the heart of this entire dispute. When does protecting your stuff go way too far? It really all boils down to this one powerful question. This is what the court had to answer, pitting that fundamental right to protect what's yours against the incredibly high value our legal system puts on human life itself.
Okay, to really understand the court's final decision, we have to start with the facts, the undisputed story of what actually happened. This is the F in our FRAC method.
So for 10 straight years, the Brineys were just getting hammered by intruders at their old, empty farmhouse. Windows were broken, things were stolen. It was a mess. Their solution? They rigged a 20-gauge shotgun to a bedroom door, aiming it to fire at anyone who opened it. Well, about a month later, a guy named Marvin Katko came into the house looking for antique bottles, opened that door, and triggered the trap.
And listen to this. Mr. Briney's own words are incredibly revealing. He flat out admitted he did it because he was angry and just fed up. Now, he did say he didn't mean to actually injure anyone, but, and this is a huge but, he couldn't explain why he used a fully loaded live shell in the trap.
All right, we've got the facts down. Now the court had to take that story and boil it down to the one precise legal question it needed to answer. This is our I in FIRAC, the issue.
In any legal analysis, this is the absolute core of the case. We're not talking about big philosophical debates. We're talking about a very specific question that grows out of a very specific set of facts. So what was that question here?
And there it is. Notice how incredibly specific that is. The court wasn't deciding if you can protect your home while you're sleeping in it. No, the key facts here are that the property was unoccupied and the force used was a spring gun, a device capable of causing death or really serious injury.
Now, courts don't just make things up as they go along. They apply established legal principles, or rules, to the facts. That brings us to the R in our FIRAC framework. So what was the governing rule in a case like this?
The fundamental rule here creates this really clear, critical distinction. The law says, yeah, you can use reasonable force to protect your stuff, but, and it's a big one, it draws a hard, bright line at using force that's designed to kill someone or cause great bodily harm, especially when it's just property on the line.
This quote really gets to the heart of that rule. The court leaned on some heavy hitters here, like the famous legal treatise Prosser on torts, to show that this isn't some newfangled idea. This principle is deeply, deeply rooted in our legal tradition.
And this quote from the Restatement of Torts, this introduces what lawyers call the owner-present test, and it's absolutely critical. The logic is just beautiful in its simplicity. A mechanical trap doesn't get more rights than a person. If you couldn't legally do it yourself standing right there, you can't build a gadget to do it for you.
Okay, this brings us to the main event, the A in FIRAC, the analysis. This is where we see the court's magic, how it logically connects that established rule to the specific facts of this case. So how'd they do it?
The court's reasoning here is just so clean. First, they acknowledge Katko's status. Yep, he was breaking the law, no question. Second, they apply the rule. You can't use deadly force to stop this type of crime. Third, they use that owner-present test. Think about it. If the Braneys had been standing in that room, could they have legally shot Katko in the legs just to stop him from stealing some old jars? No way. Therefore, their shotgun trap couldn't legally do it for them either. So, where did this all land? What was the final decision? And what's the one big idea you should walk away with from Katko versus Briney? This is our final stop, the C for conclusion.
The court's final holding was simple, direct, and powerful. Affirmed. They agreed with the lower court's decision, which means the verdict in favor of Marvin Katko, the injured trespasser, was upheld. It was a clear win for the principle of human safety over property rights.
So what's the bottom line here? The key takeaway from Katko is that it establishes a super clear, bright line rule for protecting unoccupied property. The legal system puts human safety first. Period. You simply cannot rig up a deadly device to protect an empty building. And that leaves us with a really critical question to think about.
When, if ever, do these rules change? What happens when it's not just about old jars, but about a person's own life being on the line?